Welcome back to another episode of the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Willard. I'm sitting here with Pastor Stephen Mannion. Pastor Michael Rigglesworth is not here with us today. He's helping his wife at home with the new children that they've had.
Baby number 3.
With baby number 3. Wait, is it 3?
She's pregnant again.
According to Stephen's prophecy. I get that. And then we got, of course, Bradley, the man with no last name, your favorite host with us today, over on the board, like
favorite
always.
Host. Wow.
Yeah, people like you the best.
They do like you the best.
Let's be honest. So we have a great...
Shockingly.
Yeah, we have a great topic, a great guest, and a great series that we'll be getting into. But before we go and sort of get into the details of that, let's do a quick shout out to the coffee that we are drinking today. Bradley, drop the music. There it is. We are drinking Charleston Coffee Roasters. Founded in 2005, Charleston Coffee Roasters' mission is to deliver some of the South Carolina's best coffee to their customers all over the world. They search the world for their highest quality coffee beans and then ship them back to their hometown in Charleston, South Carolina to roast. This supports sustainable farming practices, and they also partner with South Carolina sea turtle rescue programs and many worthy regional charities and schools.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, today we are drinking the flavor Organic Sumatra. It's pretty good. You guys like it?
Yeah, it's good.
And of course, we have the Ready Whip foam cream,
AKA crack cream.
AKA crack cream. And if you want more information or to order, go check them out at charlestoncoffeeroasters.com. That's charlestoncoffeeroasters.com. Now, today we have a special guest on the line with us, or on Zoom with us. But before we go and bring her on and discuss the topic that we are doing for the first part of a 3-part series that we're going to introduce today, let me do a quick buyout and a shout out to her. Today we have Melissa Hoodman on the podcast. Melissa is the co-founder of GotQuestions.org, a website that answers questions people have about God and the Bible. And I don't know about you guys, if I ever search, like, Paul said this in where, the first result that I always seem to get is from Got Questions.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
It's a great resource.
I may or may not use it sometimes for sermon preparation.
Stephen just copies and pastes it right on his sermon notes.
Copy, paste. Takes me 10 minutes to write a sermon.
But in 2002, Got Questions was born as a hobby, but soon began growing rapidly. Today, the ministry is one of the largest Christian web ministries in the entire world. Melissa serves as the director of GQ Kids, the organization site that answers questions for kids.
Oh, I thought it was like a kid's clothing, fancy clothing.
I used to use that when I was in school, actually.
That's true. She holds a degree from Calvary University in Kansas City, and her greatest passion is honoring God through her writing and telling people about Jesus. She has been published many times in print media and web sources. She serves on several ministry and advisory boards in her church. Her and her husband Shay have been married for 25 years, and they live in beautiful Colorado Springs. They enjoy serving in their church, driving 4x4 trails, and playing with their German Shepherd named Wagner.
Mudding.
So please give a great round of applause for our special guest, Melissa Hoodman. How you doing?
Hi, thanks, guys. It's great to be here this afternoon.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on. Now, Stephen, we're going to toss it over to you to do the introduction and what we're doing for the next 3 parts.
Oh, yeah. So we're doing a trilogy that's going to be staggered.
But consecutively.
But consecutively?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a 2-week break. About the whole issue of, it's to give you the fancy term, the complementarian egalitarian debate. So to simplify that is should women be elders in the church, pastors in the church? Is that scriptural or not? So today we have Melissa Hoodman, like she was just introduced, coming on with us, and she is going to talk with us about the complementarian position, which we will ask her what that means. And then we will have another guest coming on in 2 weeks, who will be a gentleman, a pastor, a Baptist pastor named Rob, who will be here explaining to us and defending the egalitarian position. And then the following week after that, the 4 of us will discuss it ourselves. And I have a note here from, what is it? I'm sorry.
Never mind. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going. I figured you'd not stop and just continue as you read that.
I can't multitask, Rob. Okay. So Melissa, thank you very much for coming on about this with us. And I have a simple question for you for the first question for our listeners. What is the complementarian position on women being pastors?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you guys asking me the easy questions today. I got questions. This is by far the most popular question we get over the last 20 years.
Oh, wow.
This has been the most popular question. So I'm glad that you guys jump into the boat and talk about it. I think that's very important. Well, complementarianism is the view that I hold. And I guess they were out of long words when they came up with that name because it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's just basically the view that God gives women different and complementary roles from men in the church. And the main passage that is used for this position is 1 Timothy 2:12. And I'll go ahead and read that because I know we're going to revert back to it many times. So in part, it says, I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Now, since that verse causes a lot of women to cringe just a little bit, I want to flesh it out a little bit for us and what the view entails. So in this passage, God is restricting women from teaching and exercising authority over men in the context of the church. Now, this is not because women are inferior. That is not true. The Bible is very clear about that over and over in Scripture. This isn't because men are better teachers, which is not always true either, right? We've all had probably some pretty amazing women teachers in our lives.
Right. And some very bad men ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but you guys are free to say that. The context of the passage gives us two reasons why God puts this restriction in place. The first reason given is that God created Adam first, and then he created Eve. So way back at the beginning of the Bible, Eve was created to be a helper. And I think it's interesting to note, just as a side note here, that the word translated helpmeet in that passage is elsewhere used for God himself. So we know for sure that it does not communicate inferiority. It's very clear in that passage. So it's not saying that Eve was inferior to Adam. It's saying that Eve was created for Adam. So when we look at the context of the passage in 1 Timothy 2, we see that God set up an order. And when women take that spiritual authority over a man in a spiritual sense, it is upending God's design that he created. So God set it up for men to take the leadership role in the church. Of course, that is under God's ultimate authority. So the second reason, if you guys look back at the passage again, the second reason is that Eve was deceived into sin. Now, I've heard this taught many different ways, and I'm going to tell you some of the ways I don't agree with. So the first one I've heard is that women are more easily deceived. But from my experience, I've known a lot of men who are pretty easily deceived too. And even in the Bible, right, we see men being deceived many times. You know, the first one that comes to my mind is Samson. He was deceived how many times?
Oh my goodness! So that's funny that you mentioned that. My brother and my sister and I were having this conversation a while ago, and my sister looked at me. She goes, "How stupid is this guy? Like everything, he's clearly setting her up to fail to test her, and all of a sudden these guys attack him, and he just keeps giving her like these things to like. And she just looks like, what's wrong with him?
Yeah, how many times do you have to wake your husband up and say, "Oh, help! Help!" Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Eventually, you should probably figure it out.
And all of a sudden, you have random rawhide tied around you for no reason. Like, what's happening here?
Oh, how'd that get there?
I mean, what in the world? So the reason that I don't think that women, that the more easily deceived argument, I guess, is because if women are allowed to teach other women, or women can teach children, then how is it wise for easily deceived people to teach other easily deceived people? It kind of sounds like a recipe for disaster, does it not?
Right.
So I completely throw out that argument. So what does that phrase mean? That Eve was deceived into sin? Can I be honest with you guys? I don't know. I don't know what it means. But in 1 Timothy chapter 2, God simply says that women are not allowed to teach or exercise authority over men in the context of the church because Adam was created first and Eve was deceived. That's what it says.
Right.
So the passage doesn't directly explain why these two facts result in women being disallowed from teaching over men. But they're God's reasons, right? And so I choose to accept them. I choose to submit to them, even if I don't fully understand why that second one is there. So I think we run into problems when we try to explain something that the Bible does not explain for us. You know, I got questions. Oftentimes we use the verse, I think it's 1 Corinthians 4:6. It says, do not go beyond what is written.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the other thing I think it's important to understand is that a lot of men are restricted from being a spiritual authority as well. So if you think of 1 Timothy chapter 3 or Titus chapter 1, all those qualifications are listed, right? For a pastor, elders, whatever spiritual authority you have in your church. And a high majority of men are not qualified from serving in those roles
100%.
either.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I would characterize and summarize a very difficult, big word position, complementarianism, in a short amount of time.
Right. So you said something, an idea of these roles complement each other. Can you explain what you mean by complement? And what kind of roles do you think like complement each other? You know what I mean? Just so we can get the understanding of what we mean by that term.
Yeah, I think my understanding of this issue really took root when I understood the role that God had for me personally.
Yeah.
In our culture, we're often defined by our roles. Like the first question people often ask is, so what do you do? What is your role? And in a sense, it's kind of like our status in the world. Well, I think that maybe is one of the reasons why men and women struggle with this topic. We're told all of our lives that we can be anything we want to be. Well, that's simply not true, right? I mean, that's not really how life works or how God's plan works. My sister wanted with all of her heart to be the first missionary to the moon. And so far that has not happened. That has not been God's plan.
They need some people up there first, unless you're trying to go off those rocks. Yeah.
That's right. So, God has a structure in place and he gives us our roles. For example, I don't have the role of mother. God never chose me to be a mother, but just because I'm not a mother doesn't make me less of a woman. And I don't have the role of pastor, but just because I'm not a pastor, that doesn't make me less of a Christian.
Right.
It's not my role. My worth comes from God, not my role. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
I'm saved through God's grace. And even though I serve a lot in my church and my role at got questions, I try to serve him faithfully, but my worth doesn't come from those roles. My worth comes from my Savior and from God.
Yeah.
So the opportunities he has given me, are beyond my wildest expectations. And I've had so many opportunities, but I don't have to let my role or my lack of role impact who I am and my worth. Yeah. So I'm really thankful.
I don't really get the objection about this being like somehow having different roles is somehow demeaning towards women. Because, for instance, if you work a job, you have a boss. Your boss has a differing role. A police officer has a differing role than I do as a civilian. Does that make the police officer somehow higher level human being? No, it's just a different role.
Yeah,
there's nothing.
Have you faced any personal pushback due to your held belief on this topic? Has anyone come to you going like, "What's wrong with you? You're female. You should be supporting the females," and all that wonderful stuff?
Yeah, that has happened. And, I have a lot of friends who disagree with me wholeheartedly on this issue. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we're sisters in Christ, and we don't let it divide us. They know my position and I know theirs, and we can live in unity in that way. I pray that God would use both of us,
right.
Yeah, this is not, I think you'd agree based on what you just said, this is not a salvation issue. And there are some who I've heard, including some pastors that I love, one of my favorite preachers in the whole world, and he doesn't say it's a salvation issue, but the way he preaches on it, it's like, if you are egalitarian, you are willingly disobeying the word of God, and therefore you obviously are living in sinful disobedience. I don't see this as a salvation issue. So that's an important thing for our listeners to know, that we don't believe that you have to fall in one of these camps to somehow be all right with Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a salvation issue, then we have some patriarchs that are in some trouble. You know what I mean? If they misunderstood ontological value, which is a relatively not an old sort of philosophical understanding when it comes to these certain terms. But so what are some of the common objections that you've heard? Because I'm sure people that take the opposite view go at you hard, especially when you're answering the questions online. I'm assuming there's a lot of "you're stupid" emails rather than questions coming in. Is that true?
Yeah, we get a fair amount of hate mail.
Yeah.
One thing about dealing on internet ministry, you can always hit delete. It's not that easy. You guys are pastors, and I understand that you can't really do that in face-to-face ministry. So.
We just push them off the stage. That's easy enough, right?
Yeah.
That's terrible. Okay,
they don't have a microphone. You can talk louder.
I have 3 common objections that we get. There's so many more, you guys. I mean, but I just picked 3. So the first one, a lot of people try to say that the women of that era weren't educated. And, that's an interesting argument that would be an objection. Well, this may be true, but I'm hesitant to give that objection any merit because, were the disciples educated?
Right.
Were all the biblical authors educated?
Right.
No.
Right?
No, as in I agree, not like actually like yes. But yeah.
I understand. But you know what? I give the biblical writers a lot of authority in my life, a lot of spiritual authority in my life. I learned from them, and education status is not mentioned in that passage. So I really feel like that's kind of a moot argument.
Yeah.
The second one is others say that in Ephesus, where this passage is being read, right? The women were very prominent in the temple of Artemis, which was located there. And the women were spiritual authorities in that temple. So some of the people proposed that these women were becoming believers of Jesus and they were wanting to take this spiritual authority into their new faith too. Kind of like, oh, I did it before. I want to be a spiritual leader now. And I think this is a kind of a hard case too to make because Paul doesn't mention Artemis or that issue at all in the entire book. So maybe you guys have another comment on that, but I think that's a pretty hard case to make.
Yeah, well, in mine, there's a couple things, and Steven's got the crap cream all over his face.
Can I phrase the argument so I'll make sure I'm understanding the argument right
yeah.
they're making?
Yeah.
Because you understand this better than me, Ryan. So is their argument that because women seem to take spiritual leadership in the temple of Artemis, therefore they shouldn't in the church? And is that the argument, and how does that make sense?
I think it's actually the opposite, that they should take.
No, well, he says here they shouldn't.
If I was Paul, I would say not to reduction of power. I would say you can keep the power, but redirect it correctly. Paul doesn't say that. He says, no, this is what I want you to do. And so, in my opinion, if it was because women were taking power because of this temple of Artemis and all the things that were happening with the worship of the deity, and a lot of scholars think that in order to be saved, the people who believe in the temple of Artemis, there's a famous line that says you must become a woman in order to be saved in relation to the cult of Artemis. If Paul, in my opinion, if Paul was correcting the culture, he wouldn't just have said the direct opposite, right? Especially if women could teach, he would have said, no, continue to have this leadership, but let's correct it. Yeah. Versus like, let's negate everything.
That's my point. I don't understand the argument. Why would you tell women in that culture that just because their culture had women as spiritual leaders that they shouldn't be in the church? I just don't get that argument.
I agree.
Okay, I'm making sure I'm understanding it right.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, one of the things that we were talking about earlier, tell me if you agree with this, Melissa, is the fact that we need to figure out where the argument's grounded, right?
Right.
Is it grounded subjectively in culture, or is it grounded objectively, but the subjective proposition is being referred to because of culture? And that's the question at hand. Is it just subjective due to the culture? Or is Paul saying it because of the culture, but relating it to an objective truth?
That's what Bradley was saying before the show.
Yeah. I was saying it was like when people today are looking at back then and like comparing today versus the past, like a lot of the times I talked to a friend of mine and she had this argument of, well, culturally women weren't equal with men back then. And so she was saying, well, today women should be able to be pastors because the culture is different. But the problem with that argument is you're inserting your own culture to substitute their culture.
And this Artemis argument makes the opposite argument, that women weren't below men in this culture, but they were actually the spiritual leaders.
Yeah, and so instead of redirecting it correctly,
Yeah.
exactly. So what's the third one that you've
Well,
encountered?
the third one's very, very simple. You're all a bunch of chauvinist pigs,
Oh,
right?
Yeah, right.
You've
Yeah,
heard it.
yeah.
We've heard
It's
it.
it's
I mean,
discrimination, something
I
along
don't
those
mince
lines. Yeah,
words, right? I mean, it's like that's what they say. But ultimately, people try to come up with all these explanations. But in that passage, he gives the two reasons.
right.
He gives the two reasons, so we can't ignore those two reasons.
Exactly.
So yeah. So
So-
the chauvinist pigs, ultimately, I choose to trust God and follow His guidelines instead of calling people names.
Yeah. So I've heard a few other objections. I don't know if I
Yes,
can say them and see if you can respond to them, and then maybe we can talk about them too. One of the ones I've often heard is you're causing believers to not want to be Christians or Christians to fall away due to this. Therefore, we should reject the complementarian view. What would you say to that?
Well, ultimately, guys, you have to draw the line. If we could say that with a lot of things, right? Ultimately, salvation is a salvation issue, and this is not. So for thousands of years, 2,000 years, people didn't have that objection. So I don't know when that suddenly would have been acceptable.
Simple enough.
Yeah, I like that. Well, think about that too. Imagine if everything in reality that we changed what was true for the sake of people liking it. How
Correct.
much of a disaster that would. Granted, we're seeing that today,
yeah,
right?
we're seeing that in our own culture.
I suddenly don't believe sin exists.
Right, because it makes you happy.
If we didn't have sin, it'd be a lot easier for people to come to Christ. Where do you draw the line on that argument?
Right,
That's
exactly.
Yeah.
ridiculous.
If Christ didn't tell you you're a bad person, because I don't like being told I'm a bad person, therefore we should get rid of any type of negative talk or judgment in relation to anything in Scripture.
And that's happening in our culture and our church today as well. Like, not my church personally, but just like looking at for example, the Methodist Church and their involvement in allowing gay marriage to be pursued and stuff like that, and just looking at those churches that allow it and how much of a disaster their church is turning into, and how it doesn't even look like a church or resemble the church in any way because they're allowing certain passes.
Right. Yeah. So I have another thought, objection too, that I would like to toss out to you to have your take on it. People always say, we read these verses that God is fair. And then they would ask the question, how is this fair? How would you respond to something like that?
Studies of the star tell us that in order for a star of that magnitude to be seen from that far away, that it requires the alignment of certain planets. I'm just thinking to myself, God loves us so much that to send us a sign, He caused the planets to come into alignment.
I'll throw that one back to those other two at the table. What do you guys
So
think?
you're saying
How would
it's
you
not
respond?
fair that men get to be the leaders in the church and the women don't?
Yes.
I would say as a pastor,
Yeah.
goodness sakes, someone please take my job.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It's I'm
I
called.
grew up in a pastor's family, and I would agree with you. I don't want that responsibility.
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, I don't think it's fair that women have to give birth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
There's
thank
a
you.
lot of
Thank
things.
God.
There's a lot of things,
Hard pass.
right? I mean,
Well, I would say to that, I'm happy that there are different roles. Like my sister, for example, is, and she listens to this show, so she knows. But she's going to be very happy when I say this. My sister is so good at being a missionary, so amazing. She's a great missionary. She loves going on mission trips and stuff like that. And just from her and my differences, I'm very behind the scenes or leading worship or something like that. That's my area of serving. And so for her, I don't want to have her gift of missionary because that's not exactly what I am.
Right.
And likewise with her, she doesn't want to get up on stage and play guitar or play bass. And she doesn't want to do
Tech
tech stuff behind the stage. So I think that it's not necessarily of a matter of like, hey, it's not fair. It's more of like, you have to be happy with what you can do.
Right.
And like not be like envious of what somebody else can do.
Yeah.
Like, because we're all like, the body would be useless if we were all left hands. Like, the body is better because we are left hands, right hands, left feet,
Right.
Yep.
or right feet.
That's a good point.
So I think that it's from my perspective, it seems like a good thing that women and men are not interchangeable, because I don't think the world would be better if a bunch of the same people were running around.
Yeah. Well,
you bring up a really good point. I think that sometimes we like to think of the things we can't do, and we focus on that, even if, there's a lot of guys in this world who can't be pastors. They don't meet the qualifications.
Right.
But I really try to encourage women to think of all they can do. And some of the greatest evangelists and Bible teachers that I have known and sat under have been women.
Yeah.
June Hunt. You're here at her.
No.
So grateful for them. I even think of Priscilla in the Bible, right? She taught Apollos the doctrines that she had learned from Paul.
Right.
What an honor that must have been. Can you imagine how honoring that would be?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we get caught up in what we can't do. But just like, your missionary sister, right? Man, praise God for her.
Yeah.
God has given and gifted her in ways of things that the rest of us can't. So I love that.
And I have an objection to that objection.
Well, actually,
too.
could I just add something real quick? So I think that when it comes to the complementarian view, I think that a lot of people, and this happened with a friend of mine, the same friend I mentioned earlier, where I think people get confused when you say complementarian, like women cannot be pastors. It's not that women cannot work in ministry and women cannot teach biblical aspects.
There's a strict position that you're referring to.
It's more leading the church and being the head of the church, so to speak, that we're saying like women should not be able, like with the complementarian view, women should not be able to do like leading a church. It's not necessarily women like can't lead like a Bible study or lead like writing books. I mean, there are some great biblical authors,
parachurch ministry,
stuff like that. It's women specifically being the head of a church or being a pastor with another, like being a lead role like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we should make that qualification too, that this doesn't apply to business or politics or organizations or, people like to take that too far. And that's when, the patriarchal system becomes a problem. So that's not what this is dealing with at all.
Yeah. One of my best bosses was a girl, and she was way better than some of my other like supervisors and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So I have an objection to this objection of God being fair. Now, granted, I hold to a personal side when it comes to this topic, but I will object to an argument if it's a bad argument, no matter what side it is. That's just kind of my nature. And I think this is a terrible argument. And I kind of look at it as in a question that William Lane Craig gave, and I want to answer it. And so he was asked the question, how is it right that God will send people to hell? Mm-hmm. And he turns around and flips the question. He goes, how is it right that God chooses to send people to heaven?
That's
the question.
Yeah.
And so my answer is like, how is this fair? I'm going to say the fairness is that we got a role in the first place. He has blessed us with the ability to do something for his kingdom, no matter what the design is. The fact that you've given me this opportunity in a role, I should be blessed by that very fact itself, and I don't even deserve that. And so until you can show me that we deserve that, that fairness objection to me just doesn't work.
Excellent. Yep. Another objection that we get at Got Questions is, well, look at so-and-so's ministry. Look at her church. God is blessing her with people. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and most of the time, how we respond is, when is church growth? When is numbers an indication of God blessing something?
Yeah.
That's not always spiritual growth is not based on numbers, right?
Correct.
So, but that's a hard one. That's a hard one because if someone is seeing a lot of results in their church, that becomes an issue. So how would you guys respond to that argument?
Well, real quick on that, I talked to Mike, who's not here, about this the other day. I told him that I would rather have 10 super like strong in their faith Christians than 100 weak Christians, so to speak. Like, numbers doesn't mean that you have good Christians in your church or like followers of God in your church even. Numbers just means that you have like a cool thing that people like to see. So I'm not saying that big mega churches are like necessarily like failures or anything like that. I'm just saying that a lot of times when you see like these big numbers, you have to look at how are people living their lives outside of church, and what is this church actually doing for the rest of the body?
Numbers
outside?
doesn't equal success automatically.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've kind of a follow-up question
I was
along
going
with
to
that.
respond to her question before you jump to your.
Okay.
If you don't mind. Yeah. So one of the points I later wrote down is, as we know, God can use any situation to bring people to Him. So it doesn't.
Praise God for that, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So it doesn't follow that if this one person is getting thousands of people for His glory, that the situation they are in is the correct situation.
Yeah, I think of Paul saying whenever they said, "Oh, that guy's over there preaching the gospel," and they're like, "Tell him to stop." And he says, "As long as they're preaching,
No.
so long as they're preaching the gospel, and that kind of leads into the question I wanted to ask you, because I'm a Methodist pastor, and but I'm complementarian, even though my denomination is egalitarian. And I said before, for me, this is not an issue that's going to like, there are some people, I respect them for this, would not be in a denomination that will ordain women. That's fine if that's their conviction, God bless them. For me, that's not. But I do hold the complementarian position. But there's a lot of, this kind of goes along with what you just said. I know women pastors in my district who do great things and are very gifted, and even gifted preachers. So my question for you is, and I've heard this, and I'm really curious as to not only yours, but Ryan and Bradley's thoughts on this. One of the arguments I heard is men are not stepping up. So therefore, the women are, and so there's a lot of that also in the local church in terms of even in the microcosm of a local church with a male lead pastor. This is in a lot of churches. The women are all the Sunday school teachers. They are leading things, and the men are just sitting back and will not lead. So, do you think that there's any? Do you have any thoughts on that? That God's like almost like, well, the men aren't stepping up, so we need pastors. So therefore, these women have to step up because there's holes that need to be filled. Or does that make sense? What I'm saying?
It does, and that's a very sad about our culture right now, isn't it? I think that's rare. Sometimes I think women don't give men the opportunity to lead. Sometimes we need to leave the position vacant a little while and let men
feel the heat,
step up and take. What did you say?
Feel the heat.
Yeah, feel the heat a little bit, But I think there are instances, especially on the mission field. I've had some friends who are female missionaries, and they go into an unreached people group and they share the gospel, and men accept Christ. And then they start a church, but none of these men know anything about God. And so she's going to have to disciple them and lead them for a time until someone's ready to take over. But that's a really difficult situation. I'd love to hear the other guys' input on that as well.
So that's a really interesting question. I don't think I've ever heard something like that. But from somebody that's regularly serves on Sunday mornings at church, and I've done so for close to 7 years now, every single Sunday, pretty much. For me, we had something similar happen at our church recently, where a worship leader left, and then we also let one of our main tech guys left the church just to go to other churches, which is not a bad thing. But we had these open positions, and it just kind of was like, like almost like a stressful kind of like burden, like, oh,
Someone
like
needs to
who's
step
going to
up.
do that? Who's going to step up and do this? But I think that if this is happening in your church at all, or like anybody, one of our listeners, if this is happening in your church, I think that the first thing to understand is that God is faithful and God will provide. So it's not necessarily that, hey, we can't get this person to fill this specific role. Let's grab somebody random from the church that's maybe not meant to be in that position. I think God will bring somebody, if you pray and you're faithful and you trust God about it, God will bring somebody in to fill that position. Now, that's also to say like men aren't stepping up. That's also true as well. I think that we have a lot of weak men in our culture today, men that don't lead their families, then they also don't lead properly, as according to like Timothy and Ephesians and stuff like that. I think that we have a lot of weak-willed men in our culture. So I understand why women are stepping up more, and that's not a bad thing either. But I think that, I think that men do need to step up more.
That's a good answer, Bradley.
And perhaps we need to be discipling our men better.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
If your denomination is finding that this is a problem, maybe that needs to be something that there needs to be some strategic look at that,
Right.
Yeah.
Why is this a problem? And how can we help our men to be discipled, to be fully devoted followers of Christ?
Yeah. And I guess if I were to answer that question, taking sort of the hat on for the complementarian side, is I don't look at it like a volleyball game, right? Like, all these guys are injured. What should I do? Well, the coach is like, who will step up? I'll put me in, coach. I'll barrel this thing over here. I look at it as if a man doesn't step up, that's on the man, right? The judgment will be placed on him, versus looking at the women and saying, you should have done this, therefore you're morally wrong to not have stepped up. So I don't think there's any sort of moral judgment on the woman if the man of the household's not doing what he's doing. I do think the woman in this view should continue on this righteous path, but that doesn't follow, therefore, I should step up in the way that we think of like a volleyball game, right? It should continue to speak to the husband, speak to this. But luckily, I think there is no condemnation against the women for not doing that. It's strictly on the man. This is your fault. Like, you will be judged because of this. And so in a specific church situation, this sounds bad. If no man wants to step up, I am perfectly okay with the church falling away and not becoming a church anymore.
Or merging with another church.
Yeah, when that's an option.
Yeah, knowing that's an option. If this is which the complementarian side is arguing for, if this is what God has deemed for our roles, then I do not think because man won't fulfill a role that someone should step out of their roles, if this is how you view it. And I still think then the judgment would be on the man for what's happening to the church. And it wouldn't be on the women, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to look at this.
Melissa, can I ask you just to speak from your heart to women that are egalitarian, that maybe are listening right now and are feeling really heated and offended? Is there anything like, not argument wise, but just speak from your heart about anything? Does that make sense? Anything that's on your heart that you would just speak to them right now?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that you guys are touching on these topics, and it is a heated issue because we don't like to be told we can't do something. I get that. I completely understand that. I want to go back to something I said earlier. And I think what I would tell you as a woman listening today is that your worth comes from God and not from the role that you have. Like I said earlier, I'm not a mother. God didn't choose me to be a mother, but that doesn't make me less of a woman. God didn't choose me to be a pastor, but that doesn't make me less of a Christian. My worth does not come from my roles. My worth only comes from God. And so when we think of it like that, I think it's easier. It's easier, at least it was for me. That really helped my understanding of the whole issue. And so I would encourage you to pray and ask God, oh, what do you want from me? How can I serve you with all of my heart? How can I be a fully devoted follower of you and share my faith with people? And God will give you the perfect role for that.
Absolutely.
Good answer.
And I think, and I could like you guys' thoughts on this too. I think there's, in the literature, there's this difference of categories, right? There's this, what they call ontological value versus like economic value. And what it sounds like the complementarian is saying is ontologically, meaning there's this value of being human and made in the image of God. But there's also this other value of economics of the role that we play that are assigned to the person, and that's what they're referring to. And what it seems to me then they're saying is when God designs something in such a way that when we fulfill the roles that he then created for that, like what he designed to demonstrate to the world is then at its full sort of function. And to not take on the role that he designed strictly and only for you, right? There are some roles that he said the women should have that men shouldn't have. To look at that sort of role and go, I don't care what you think, seems to then not the image or the sort of representation of what he's doing through these creation roles seems to then function improperly due to you not desiring to step up and take this role, because there's a divine blessedness through the roles that each of us are given, and it's to be sort of this representation of who he is and what he's doing for salvation. And is that a good summary? Kind of what? Okay.
I would like to just jump back to something I said earlier too. Yeah. Like you were saying, Ryan, like we all have our own roles, and they're all divinely divinely designated to those roles.
Yeah.
So I feel like, if you're of the egalitarian kind of viewpoint, like, and you feel that you should be a preacher, I can understand your arguments, but maybe you're just not looking at where you should fit in properly. But I know a lot of women that have the egalitarian kind of viewpoint, and their like kind of role in the church is not a preacher. So if your role is like not a preacher, why would you get mad at an issue? Like it's like you're getting mad at something, or you're arguing at something that doesn't affect you almost. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Like if I was really mad that like, because my role isn't to be a pastor, and like I know that, but like I don't understand why I would get mad at somebody else not being able to be a pastor. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
it's amazing how mad. If I'm a Methodist, so we believe in infant baptism. If there's a Baptist and they believe in adult only baptism, we can disagree, and we're not going to get irate with each other and be super offended.
Well, you shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
Yeah.
We're just going to be like, okay,
Really?
Yeah.
we're going to be like, I think your view is wrong here, but it's not personal, right? Or it shouldn't be personal. But for some reason, this topic, it gets so personal. Like you are not allowed to have the opposing view, especially if you're, where you become like almost ostracized because you are chauvinistic and closed-minded.
Yeah.
It's so much baggage attached.
Can I just phrase what I feel like I'm explaining what I want to say poorly. Okay. So like, just to give an example, it's like, one of my friends is black, for example, and he has more of a conservative viewpoint on the world. But I have another white friend who has a more liberal point of the view, and she argues for him that he's oppressed, and he doesn't feel like he's oppressed.
Right.
That's kind of how the egalitarian mindset kind of sounds like to me. Like, you don't want to be a preacher, but you're arguing for other people who maybe don't feel like they should be preachers. Like it almost feels like you're making a argument for somebody else
that they don't want to have.
Do you understand? Like that's kind of how I'm trying to understand or explain it.
Yeah. So Melissa, do you think there's any strong sense of almost cultural individualism within the egalitarian view that you're sensing from this? And let me phrase what I mean by that. That I shouldn't be stifled in anything I want to do.
Yeah,
period.
because that's what the culture tells us it should be, right? Okay. But that's not how the world works.
Right. Okay.
You know, like my sister wanted to be a missionary to the moon. I mean, that's not how the world works, right? Yet, anyway. So, I think it almost becomes like sticking up for the oppressed in a sense, like you were saying earlier. And I don't think that's the point of the passage. But right. We feel like we have to stick up for someone who's not allowed to do something because we think the world should be a different way.
Right.
But that's not how God created it, as the passage says.
Right. And if he created it in such a way, because he's going to reach his utmost glory, we should, if your view is correct, right? I'm not trying to be as less biased as possible. Yeah. If it's correct, then we ought to, in a sense, bow a knee to his design because we believe he has created a world in such a way that brings him the ultimate glory. Whether we like it or not, this is what we should do.
Like, personally, I believe it because I believe that's what the Bible teaches.
Correct, yeah.
And I strive to submit to what the Bible teaches. So I can't in good conscience reinterpret the passage simply because I don't I wanted to say something else, right? I choose to trust God. I choose to trust his guidelines, whether or not I fully understand or whether I even agree with them.
Right.
But I don't find myself in disagreement. I'm not saying that.
No, right, yeah.
I understand how it can be a difficult issue for people.
Yeah.
Francis Chan said, if the Bible says that Asian guys should walk around on their heads all the time, he said, I would walk around on my head all the time.
That's right.
That's right. It's whether you like it or not. Yeah.
He'd probably keep more of his hair just so he get more of a cushion.
Melissa, thank you very much for coming on with us. I wonder if you could share with our listeners where they can find out more about you, any other information that you would like to pass on.
Sure. I would love if people would check out Got Questions, gotquestions.org. We seek to answer people's Bible questions and do so in a timely manner. And it's really exciting what God has done with a little hobby that we put together 20 years ago. And it's just a really good testimony of what God can do with someone. So I'd love it if people would check out Got Questions.
How many questions do you have answered now? I know it's thousands.
How many questions do you get?
We get about 150 questions every day.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm currently looking. What are 679,917? That's the questions that we've personally gotten and responded via email.
Wow.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. And their answers are good answers.
It's fun. It's really kind of it's kind of an interesting cultural thing, too. If you click on the top 20 questions, you can see what people are actually asking, not what we think they're asking.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Great.
Maybe some new podcast ideas for you guys in there.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Caffeinated Christian podcast. If you... Oh, gosh, I forget how Mike does
Mike's
this.
here, so
Mike's
fall
not
apart
here.
without him.
Yeah. So if you want to give us a follow on one of our social media platforms, you can find us on both Instagram and Facebook at The Caffeinated Christian. And if you would like to reach out to us personally, you can reach out to us at thecaffeinatedchristian@gmail.com.
706
at gmail.com. You can reach out to us there. And just keep an eye out for part 2 and 3 of this podcast series. We're going to be looking at it from the opposite point of view that we did today, which is egalitarian. And we're also going to be doing a kind of... Am I saying it wrong?
Egalitarian.
Yeah, we're not talking about birds next week.
Listen, I keep thinking of like Eagleton from Parks and Rec.
Oh, Eagleton.
That's the only... That it keeps getting stuck in my head.
We are not against eagles in this podcast.
No.
Okay. But we're also going to be doing a kind of reaction to our thoughts on these 2 podcasts. So keep an eye out for those, and we will see you next time.